What's up, everybody? This is episode 68 of the Clappercast. I'm Burke, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Sean. Sean, been a bit of a slow week, but coming off that hot episode with the Hockey Minute. How's it going, man?
You know, you mentioned the slow week. I am having a real tough time finding anything to post on Instagram. I'm slowly turning us into a shitty memes page, so we got that going for us at least.
I'm all about it, but we thought it would be a good time to start doing some off-season rankings because it has been a bit of a slow week. So, and it's kind of turning into a slow month almost. So
Yeah, I mean, the off-season air quotes here seems to be almost done. No one's really doing much anymore. It's just like draft picks getting their ELCs, so should be safe in providing some grades and rankings to the teams here now.
yeah, I mean, there's still a few kind of bigger names out there that haven't signed, which might change the rankings a bit. And there's always the option of trades and all that sort of stuff. So these aren't set in stone or anything, and maybe we'll have to come back and review some of them. But
You know what? That just gives us double the content, so no complaints over here.
yeah, make work project. So we thought we'd start with the Central because it is the epitome of averageness. So let's dive straight in and go alphabetically here with the Chicago Blackhawks. Sean, take it away.
So Chicago Blackhawks here, I gave them a solid D minus. They did, in my view, literally nothing to improve the team. I think it was Matthias Janmark they brought in. Solid depth piece, but considering they also lost Brendan Saad in this offseason, they didn't actually improve their forwards at all. They also managed to piss off the entire core of the team by trading away Brendan Saad. So you've now got a slightly distraught Taves, Kane, Keith, Seabrook, key guys that have been there for a lot of years. They're now a bit annoyed that happened. And they also let Corey Crawford walk, and now they're rolling with a Malcolm Subban, Colin Delia goalie tandem. And I'll be honest, I think both of those goalies are borderline backups on any other team, and one of them is going to be a starting goalie in the NHL. So how are your thoughts on the Chicago's offseason here?
I also gave them a D. I guess I was a little bit nicer, and maybe that's because I think a D minus doesn't really exist. But
it does now.
Yeah, I gave them a D, and I really like that point that you made about pissing off the team. Saad and Crawford have been there for some big moments, and when Saad came back in that Panarin trade, it was rumored largely because Taves wanted him back, and now the rumor is that Taves is upset that he's gone, and the core is upset that he's gone. And also, they sent out that memo. Pardon me. Did you remember that team memo that they sent out to the fans?
Yeah, they did the same as the New York Rangers did a couple years ago, saying like, "Yep, this is going to be a rough few years here. We're rebuilding now." So it's kind of clear where their motivations are.
Yeah, definitely. And so I agree. I don't think they really made the team better. They brought in Janmark, so that double mark combo. They brought in Nikita Zadorov in the Saad trade. They re-signed Dominic Kubalik, which I think is the one shining star of this offseason, is that they were able to sign him for a bridge deal. That Subban Delia combo, I don't know if that's going to be super great. If their intention is to tank, I think then their grade is an A, because I think this team is going to be pretty uncompetitive next season.
That's
barring,
a very nice way to put that.
Some very insane seasons from like their top six, but I mean, they also lost Olimata, and they traded Dylan Sakura for Brandon Peary, which is kind of a a 1-for-1 trade. I don't think they got better. I think they kind of made their players mad. They kind of snuck into playoffs, had a exciting, if you want to see it that way, I know you probably don't, series against the Oilers and snuck a win out. And I think fans might be upset that they've gone full rebuild after that. But again, it was definitely overachieving, taking advantage of a Oilers team that has their own issues. So yeah, D. I think we're kind of in agreement on this one.
Yep, sounds like we had about the same argument for that.
Okay, well, moving from the garbage heap to probably the best in the Central, the Colorado Avalanche. I gave them an A. Um, and this is the team on the receiving end of Brandon Saad. So it's kind of funny that one team is so bad and one team is so good. So good.
Brandon Saad, the offseason kingmaker.
So they brought in Brandon Saad, got rid of Nikita Zadorov, but they replaced Nikita Zadorov with Devon Taves, which was an absolute unreal pickup for them. I mean, as if their blue line didn't needed to get any better. They've got Nikita Zadorov out when he kind of had his own defensive struggles, and they've got like amazing defensive prospect Bowen Byram waiting in the ranks to come in. So I think this is a great move for them. They also re-signed Ryan Graves. They signed Valery Nichushkin they extended him, and they also re-signed Andrei Burakovsky. Matt Nieto leaving, Vlad Nemestikov leaving. I think this is a good offseason for them, and really, if they did nothing but bring in Devon Taves, I think they still get an A. That's a great move. So what do you think?
Yeah, I'm pretty much in agreement. So I gave them a B+. Ultimately, my view of their offseason plan is that they're a good team already, and they're mostly in a holding state of just needing to maintain and make the small tweaks here and there to improve that roster. So we saw that when they bring in Brandon Saad to improve the depth scoring and the forward depth in that way. We see bringing in Devon Taves, like you said, he's a great defenseman. He's going to be a really solid, probably second pairing defenseman for them, where he's going to be better in that role than Nikita Zadorov was. So Joe Sakic identified where his team was, and he made the small tweaks without giving up too much, without sacrificing a whole lot of strengths at other positions to improve what he already has. So that's about as good as you can ask for in a team that's in the position that they are, where they just need to keep making those little tweaks to continually advance the team forward. So I end up with a B+ just because there wasn't like a random massive, like they didn't bring in Taylor Hall. That was something that could have been talked about that could have put them over the top completely. But they did a very good job of continuing the trajectory of the team as it propels them through up the standings and to a likely Stanley Cup final placement or a win.
So we're in agreement so far on both, which is rare. Okay. We'll move on to the Dallas Stars. So if we're going strictly on jersey reveals, F for sure. F. Not a fan of that.
Do you not like laser tag?
Neon laser tag.
Saul Goodman would be proud.
I will not be buying my Heiskanen jersey in neon green.
Oh, man.
I will be buying the victory green jersey.
You don't want to hit up a glow-in-the-dark bowling alley?
Go on sale. No, I do not.
10-year-old me would have been stoked.
I'll pass it to you for this one on the first. I'm curious as to how you ranked them.
I gave them a B-. I see them in a very similar position as Colorado, that they just needed to maintain the team's roster because they're clearly very good as they are. They did that just fine. They got Julius Honka back. He sat out the last season with a contract dispute. And they retained some key guys like Rupe Hintz, Anton Hudobin, Radek Faksa. They lost Matthias Janmark, but I think they have enough depth forwards that they can cover that, as clearly shown by having all of their depth forwards injured in the playoffs and still doing well. They didn't bring in anybody significant that's going to improve the roster, so they're not doing quite as good as...
Whoa.
Who did I forget?
Mark Pysyk.
Oh, the versatile forward defenseman.
Right D, right wing. You're not saying that that's significant? Come on.
He's gonna be great covering the depth injuries on the team. But
yeah, versatile.
But yeah, they compared to Colorado, Mark Pysyk doesn't match up with Devon Taves and Brandon Saad, so they get a slightly lower grade than Colorado. But they did do exactly what they needed to in maintaining the trajectory of the roster and keeping around the guys who have helped them get there.
Yeah, ultimately, I have similar reasons. I gave them a B+. So I gave Colorado an A. You gave them B+. I gave Dallas a B+. You gave them B-. So my curve is a little bit higher than yours.
I'm the tougher grader.
I also gave Chicago a D instead of a D-. So I'm just like, a couple letter grades above you.
You're about 5 to 10 percentage points above me.
But our pattern is the same, which is funny. So Dallas B+. Again, you kind of lack that big name bring in, but they retained the guys that they needed to. They re-signed Hudobin, which was huge. I think that's massive. They have him and Bishop signed for 3 more years. So that's amazing for them. They re-signed Andre Sekera. He looked consistent during the playoffs. That was a pretty low risk signing when they signed him, and I think it worked out really well for them. He had that great play behind the net to Kiviranta, which was surprisingly like, where did that come from? So I think that was well deserved. Kept Faxa, kept Guryanov, Hintz, and managed to get Honka back. Brought in Mark Pysyk to bring in some depth. Looks like they're going to lose Corey Perry and Roman Polak. So ultimately, I think that they stayed about the same. So B+, didn't get significantly worse, didn't lose anyone. Sorry, Corey Perry, of significant value.
Shots fired.
Yeah. I think he fit in really well, but just the cap situation, they kept who they prioritized, and that makes sense.
His redemption arc is complete. He doesn't need to stay around too much longer.
Yeah. Just interestingly enough, it'll be interesting how we rate them at the end of next offseason, because they have Cogliano, Como, Dickinson, Kiviranta, Johns, Oleksiak, Heiskanen, Pysyk, Fedun, Honka, and Dowling, all with contracts expiring. So looking forward to seeing how that goes, because there could be a very different Stars team next season. We'll move along, I guess, to the Minnesota Wildcards. I'll go first.
Not a bad name change.
Just to be fair. I kind of struggled with this one. I gave them a C- because I didn't really know what else to say. I felt like they were average, but a little bit on the worst side of average. So I gave them a C-. They brought in Nick Bjugstad, Jonas Brodin, extended him 7 years, $6 billion. Seems expensive. They traded Marcus Johansson for Stahl. They brought in Nick Bonino, traded 2 picks and Luke Kunin for him, and re-signed Greenway for 2 years. And they let Alex Galchenyuk go, and they let Mikko Koivu go. So I feel like they lost kind of a lot of their identity almost with Koivu and Stahl leaving. And I'm not sure about this random collection of guys that they've got on their team. It kind of seems like such a, like, by the powers of like all of us, we're a team.
It's like patchwork.
Like,
it's like Bill Guerin's making a quilt.
Yeah, that's very poetic. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I just don't see I can't tell if they got better or worse. So I think I might reserve judgment a little bit until we see how this team does. But it seems like a very weird team. I guess they also lost their goaltender, right?
Yeah, they replaced Dubnyk with Talbot.
So, yeah. So again, I don't know. What about you, Sean?
I ended up with a C- for them as well. I struggled with this one. It's hard for me to come up with a grade because I still have no idea what Bill Guerin is doing. Like whether or not he's trying to commit to a playoff push or a cup run, or whether or not he's doing a rebuild. Like, I just cannot figure him out. So his tweaks kind of look like they're leaning towards he wants to continue winning now because he's bringing in a better goalie. He's bringing in experienced depth forwards, proven guys like Nick Bonino who have like playoff pedigree, and he's giving up a prospect and draft picks for doing that. That being said, none of this stuff that he did was substantial, and it's, like I said, it's hard to grade against a team's state and status when I can't figure out what he's actually trying to achieve. Like you said, the good point about losing identity players and veterans like Mikko Koivu and Eric Stahl. Koivu especially, him being like a lifer in the Minnesota Wild organization, that he's been there for so long and now he's gone. It's going to be a huge shock to the team's dressing room and the locker room and the morale and the identity of the team to lose him. So ultimately, I feel like the team's a bit worse off, except they did upgrade a bit in goaltending. I think Talbot's a bit better than Dubnyk right now.
That's a good point. I don't really know what Bill Guerin's doing either, and maybe that's his strategy is
Well,
the Minnesota Wild.
I was just going to say, you called him the Wild
If he doesn't know what he's doing, neither does anybody else in the Central.
Chaos.
So, I don't know. It's going to be tough to compete for a playoff spot, I think, in this division for Minnesota. Yeah, so I guess this is where we meet. I'm curious to see if we diverge at this point or if we stay the same in our rankings. So we'll move on to the Nashville Predators. This is the second time where we've had a trade where back-to-back we rate them. So Luke Kunin went to Nashville in that Nick Bonino trade.
Okay, well, for the Nashville Predators, I settled on a solid C of completely average. I see this Predators team right now as there's in this weird state of limbo and uncertainty where I feel like, especially in their division, they're just past a cup window with like Colorado and Dallas taking over, but they're not quite in rebuild territory. And what David Poile seems to be trying to do is just to maintain. That he's maintaining that kind of average mediocrity in the hopes that the last season was a bit of an underperformance, a bit of a struggle or a slump for his forwards, because ultimately that's kind of what did them in was the complete lack of offense from guys like Forsberg, who struggled quite a bit through that year. They mostly brought in a few depth guys, notably Borowiecki and Matt Benning and Luke Kunin. They're going to help out. They're going to provide a bit of a stronger presence in the bottom half of the lineup. Ultimately, their best move of the offseason was getting Yaroslav Askarov in the draft, the highly touted goalie prospect who's supposed to be like the next, Vasilevsky, best since Carey Price, that type of guy. So that's going to be a huge one moving forward as Pekka Rinne is starting to hit the twilight of his career. And, UC Saros is good, but it's nice to have another high-end goalie in the pipeline like that.
I had the exact same rating.
Whoa.
C.
Our paths stay on the same trajectory.
Yeah, 2 in a row. Yeah, it seemed like it was completely average. I think they have a bit of cap space left, so maybe they're trying to make a last-minute push for some of the UFAs that are still out there, like Mike Hoffman.
I was going to say Mike Hoffman. They kind of free up
an interesting addition.
Yeah, they free up a forward spot by buying out Kyle Turris to bring in someone who might be able to score a little bit more and address some of the issues from last season in Mike Hoffman.
Yeah, if offense was their problem and, Roman Josi can't score every goal for them, I think that they might be looking at bringing somebody in. I think maybe they lost out on some of the big names and are now trying to fill that spot. Because, they bought out Kyle Turris, got rid of Nick Bonino, Craig Smith too. So they're probably going to be looking to replace that secondary scoring, especially if their primary scoring struggled a lot last season. But, they got a head coach that's going to be having his first full season with the team. So we'll see how that happens. But yeah, kind of a completely average off season. If I was a fan, I don't know if I'd be happy or disappointed.
I would be neutral.
I don't know. Yeah, kind of a very neutral.
I wouldn't cheer or be mad. That being said, though, an interesting thought is that, David Poile's been the GM there for like their entire history. So he's coming up on like 20 plus years, 23 or 24 years or something. If this team or when this team kind of goes down into rebuild, is that time to replace him? Does he kind of find himself on the hot seat if Nashville struggles again next season?
I would say so, yeah. I think his career has been kind of like helping set up teams because he did that with Washington too, where he came in and he really reset the franchise and kind of saved it from folding, essentially, from being such a tire fire, and then came into Nashville and has been like constant stability, like lots of good moves. So I think, eventually it doesn't work out. I think he's got to move on. And I could see that being sooner rather than later based on just how close they've gotten and how they seem to be getting a little bit further away from that than they were. So yeah, we're both in agreement that they were Nashville Predators, just the symbol of mediocrity. C for Central.
There we go.
Okay. Well, let's move on to the St. Louis Blues. We talked to the Hockey Minute guys about this, and they both gave them some pretty negative scores, and I'm curious as to see how we line up on this. You went first for Nashville, so I'll go first on this one. I gave them a C minus because, yeah, I agree with the Hockey Minute guys that Pietrangelo was a huge part of that team and that getting rid of your captain always sucks. But I also really like Torrey Krug, and I think that he's a great player and brings a totally different part of just that excitement to the game, I guess. Um, he seems like a guy that in Boston really enjoyed like the big minutes, like the big moments. He has got a lot of big time goals, big time plays, played on the power play, got a good shot, can skate, had that exciting play in the playoffs against St. Louis where he hit Robert Thomas without a helmet on, and and they had that great Twitter back and forth where did we just become best friends moment. He's got a great social media game. He used to poke fun a lot at Brad Marchand. I think he's going to be a good addition to St. Louis because, I mean, St. Louis is a good team, and I think everybody knows that. But to me, I've never really felt like they've had that huge personality, and maybe that's part of Pietrangelo. I don't know. Maybe that's like, that stoic, like professional kind of guy. But I think Torrey Krug might bring in a little bit more of that like fun energy. So I'm excited to see what that happens in St. Louis.
Bit of swagger out of their back end now.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe I'm just, too big on Torrey Krug, but I think that they didn't have the worst offseason, just losing Pietrangelo. And, if the guy wanted more money, like, did he really want to stay in St. Louis that bad? If he wants to win and doesn't think he's going to win again in St. Louis, well, whatever. We'll bring in a guy who wants to be here. So what do you think?
I actually gave them a D. That's generally looking at the offseason moves, they didn't really do anything to actually improve the team. And then I agree with Brandon from the Hockey Minute when he said like they lost their captain, they lost their best defender, they lost like kind of this central identity piece of their team who's been there for a decade plus, and then they replaced him with Torrey Krug, who is good, like you say, he's not a bad defenseman, he's a legit top pairing defenseman, but he's not Alex Pietrangelo, he's not quite the type of defenseman that Pietrangelo was. So I see that as a bit of a downgrade. And, looking at what else they brought in, it's like a bunch of depth guys like Kyle Clifford and Steven Santini and a few other players who aren't actually going to make the team much better. They also downgraded, in my opinion, backup goalie, and they didn't bring anyone else in when they got rid of Jake Allen, and they're replacing him with Ville Husso. Now, last year we saw potentially Jordan Binnington getting shaky or solved by opposing teams. And if Binnington gets solved or shaky again next season, they have a rookie backup goalie who might have to come in and take on 20, 30 games. That could be an issue when you're playing in the Central Division against Colorado, against, Winnipeg, against Dallas, who have high-powered offensive capabilities.
Yeah, and that's going to be really important this season because it's going to be compressed. So your backup's going to be a very important part of your team because you're going to be playing probably back-to-backs a lot. And so, yeah, that could be a definite factor in a competitive division. Yeah, I mean, I agree with those. I just think that they did get worse, but not to the degree that I think a lot of people are thinking. I mean, Pietrangelo was there for a long time, but they've got some great defenders in, Vince Dunn. They've got
Bertuzzo, Gunnarsson.
And then, what's his name? The guy who sounds like he's Ukrainian, but he's actually Canadian.
Parayko.
Yeah. Parayko is an absolute stud. So I think, if you look at that D-core, yeah, it gets a little bit worse. But, it's still really good. Pretty insane. And, Pietrangelo is an all-around great defenseman. But bringing in Krug, I think, makes your blue line a bit more dynamic. I think he can really show Vince Dunn how to play that way, because that's kind of how Vince Dunn came into the league. And so
that's a good point.
I think that
take on a mentorship role with
yeah,
Dunn.
I think you'll have Parayko be like kind of that steady guy, and Krug can be the more dynamic guy. So I think there's a lot to be excited about for Blues fans. And yeah, they did get a little bit worse, but it's not apocalyptic.
We shouldn't be pushing the panic button quite yet.
Yeah, that's definitely. But it is a really good point about the goaltending. I think maybe they should. I don't know who's available, but maybe they should look at getting some sort of backup, because you're totally right on that.
Not to say that Ville Husso is going to be a bad goalie. It's the unproven rookie aspect of it. That's like, is he going to be good enough for what we need for a team that's going to be competing for another cup?
Yeah, and I mean, there was like a million goalies available, so I'm sure that there's still somebody out there looking for a deal. I mean, hey, what about like Craig Anderson? Like, just bring in some guy who's, looking for a 1-year deal. Somebody like that, just maybe play him like, I don't know, 20 games or something. Like, depending on how long the season is, I guess, just 20, 25, 30, whatever. There's going to be somebody available, is basically what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was kind of surprised on that one, that we're not so far off on that. So we'll move along to the last team in the division here with the Winnipeg Jets. So, Sean, what are your thoughts on how Winnipeg has done this offseason?
For Winnipeg, I settled on a C+. They had a few very crucial needs on that roster, and they kind of addressed one of them, bringing back Paul Stastny from Vegas. They didn't address at all the need for defense or the potential need for a backup goalie. That defense, like we talked about this a lot over the last season, that they're just not good, and we saw how badly they performed generally in giving Connor Hellebuyck the chance to win the Vezina Trophy. And the only change from last year is that they re-signed Dylan DeMello, and they acquired him at the trade deadline, and that's basically they're running with the same group of guys, unless Ville Heinola is going to be able to take a big step forward, and they lose Kulikov, so that's kind of like, yeah, it's about the same, and they didn't bring in anyone or even address that at all. So they also lost a good D prospect in Carl Dahlstrom too when they traded him for Stastny. The other thing is, like, Hellebuck's career trend is that he has a really good year followed by a bad year. So he just had his good year, and if that trend is to be followed, he's done this a couple of times where he goes good year, bad year, good year, bad year. He's going to have an off season this year. And Laurent Brossoit had a good start with Winnipeg, but he hasn't been able to maintain that. And like you mentioned, this point about the need for a good backup goalie, talking about St. Louis's situation, Winnipeg's going to need that too, where they have someone who can step in and potentially have to play a few more games. And Brossoit was not able to do that in the 1920 season.
Laurent Brossoit is that old? He's played in the 1920s?
Did I say 1920s or 1920 season?
You said 1920 season, but
okay,
that's a long time ago, Sean.
It was. It was a solid 10 decades ago.
I was a little harsher on the Jets. I gave them a D. D for defense, because they didn't bring anybody in, and I think it was such a it was such a glaring hole in the lineup that they needed to bring somebody in, and they didn't. They let Kulikov go. Yeah, they re-signed DeMello, which was a good move. Brought in Stastny, but I really think that they needed to bring somebody in on the blue line. I think it was just such a missed opportunity if they don't bring anybody in, because it's like they need to bring somebody in. They can't run like a blue line of Morrissey, DeMello, Pionk, Beaulieu, Derek Forbort, Lucas Biza, and Tucker Poolman, and then Sami Niku, I guess, as the bump guy, and Ville Heinola. It's just, that's not looking competitive.
You raised some valid criticisms, especially that missed opportunity point. That they could have had it. They had a chance to make an impact, but they didn't.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they're looking to bring in some of the the pending UFAs. I don't think they can really with the cap space that they don't have anymore.
Well, this is where we go back to that discussion we had about the Patrick Laine situation, where his camp might want to trade. So does Patrick Laine become the trade bait for, a solid top four, even top pairing defenseman?
Yeah, that's actually on my list here. Is just Laine ? Because it's like that in and of itself is a bad offseason. It's just like one of your star players is not just rumored to want out, is just like actively looking to get out of there now, with his agent saying a trade would be mutually beneficial. It's like, oh, okay, well, I guess we have to shop this guy now. Yeah, I mean, bringing in Stasny's at like 6 point something mil per year. I'm not sure if any of that was retained. Probably not. Is Vegas? No, wait.
Look like it.
He signed. He didn't trade, right?
It was signed. It was a trade. He signed. He had been signed.
Okay, so I mean that's a lot of money for a 34-year-old forward that they could have used on, a D-man or two. But I mean, maybe they're making
6.5 is what Torrey Krug went for.
Yeah. So
they're
they probably could have brought in
Stastny
two. But like Hamanich is available, Manitoba guy. If they make some magic happen, if they trade Laine and like free up some cap space, maybe they could bring in a guy like him. I think that would be a good move.
They might even be able to now, because they're going to have Brian Little going on LTIR to free up a couple million as well.
Right. I think Hamanich and then Sami Vatanen are probably the biggest names available still for blue line players. I don't think Vatanen would be as good of a fit, considering they have Pionk and Morrissey who can kind of play the power play already. But I mean, maybe they go crazy and sign like Chara. Just bring in Zdeno Chara. Why not?
That could be an interesting one.
Jets legend. So yeah, D for the Jets, because it's literally D ? Because it's like, where are they? Where is this defense, Winnipeg? You got to bring them in. So I'm gonna stay with that D unless they bring in some sort of defenseman, because it's just, I don't think the team is built in a way to be successful. And with the season they just had, and you're totally right, like the defense that they had allowed Hellebuck to win the Vezina, not because they were insanely great, because they had a lot of scoring opportunities that came
They were
up.
so bad that Hellebuck had to make 7,000 high danger saves a game.
Yeah, exactly.
No exaggeration at all.
Yeah, no. So I think that, yeah, they did not do very well. Well, we were a lot closer than I thought. Normally we're pretty far apart on our ratings and how we expect things to go, and
I'm gonna have to start working on the collusion case here.
Yeah, we were doing our research together, not separate.
Yeah.
In our playoff predictions, though, we were kind of starting to be more in tune. So maybe that's the new pattern on the show, is just one opinion. No, no conflicting
two heads with
sides.
one opinion.
Yeah. Yeah.
The think tank is real.
I guess next week's episode we'll probably move on to the Pacific. Hey.
Yeah, sure. We'll do the Pacific next week.
Round out the Western Conference, and then we'll follow up with the Atlantic and the Metro.
Nope, I think that wraps things up for this time here on Clappercast. Make sure you rate, review, and subscribe to our show on any podcast platform, and spread around the good word of Clappercast. To keep up to date with the latest content, you can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Clappercast Media, or on Twitter at Clappercast. And from there, you can also tell us how far off we are on the off-season grades. We will be back next time with more hockey talk.